The silence on the other end of the line was heavier than the gray. Suffocating mist that passes for weather in Portland in November. I was holding my breath. Beside me on our immaculate gray sofa, my husband, Ben. They was doing the same. His hand, usually so warm, was clammy as it gripped mine. Anna Ben. The voice was Ms. Davis, Janet Davis, our caseworker from the Portland Adoption Services. Her voice was exactly as I remembered from our home visits, crisp, professional, and entirely devoid of warmth. Yes, Ms. Davis, we're here, Ben said, his voice straining to sound casual. There was a rustle of paper, a metallic click, maybe a pen. Yes, she said. Well, after a careful review of my final home study report, and in consultation with the board, the agency has decided not to move forward with your application at this time. At this time, 3 small, devastating words. 3 words that took the last 5 years of our lives, the needles, the procedures, the endless, gut-wrenching hope, and the slow, agonizing grief of infertility, and dismissed them with the click of a pen. I didn't realize I had made a sound until Ben's grip tightened on my hand. It was a small gasp, the sound of the last bit of air being punched out of me. I looked away from the phone, away from Ben's suddenly pale face, and stared across the hall. I stared at the door that was supposed to be a nursery. We'd painted it a soft, hopeful color morning calm. We had spent over $3,000 on a beautiful, handcrafted crib from a local woodworker in Selwood. We had a mobile with little felted llamas. We had a stack of board books Ben had bought, already worn, because he'd been reading them out loud every night to an empty room. Just practicing, he'd said. Now, it was just a room full of expensive, useless promises. May we ask why Ben's voice was shaky? He was the engineer, the logician. He needed a reason. Another rustle of papers, as noted in my report. Ms. Davies said, her tone unchanged, as if she were reading a grocery list. The committee and I felt concerned. Your home environment, while immaculate, presented as somewhat staged, we felt it lacked a certain lived-in warmth. I squeezed my eyes shut. Lacked warmth. Furthermore, she continued, and I could just picture her, sitting in her drab office, adjusting her glasses. Your rigid organization and the clear anxiety over order suggests a potential inflexibility. We felt this might indicate an inability to cope with the inherent chaos and emotional turbulence of parenthood. She was calling me cold. After all the interviews where I had poured my heart out, after all the invasive questions, after I had literally detailed my entire medical history, my childhood trauma, my financial statements, she had boiled my entire being down to 2 words: lacking warmth. We need to be sure, she concluded, her voice softening by maybe 1 single degree, that our children are placed in homes that are not just safe, but emotionally flexible. I am truly sorry. You may, of course, reapply in 12 months. Goodbye. Anna. Ben. The line clicked. The silence that rushed back in was deafening. The only sound was the relentless, drumming rain against the windows of our perfect, staged, cold, and childless home. I looked down at our coffee table. It was a mid-century modern piece, polished to a high shine. There wasn't a single speck of dust on it. I saw a single tear fall from my eye and hit the dark wood, shattering the perfect reflection. I didn't wipe it away. I just watched it. A tiny, chaotic puddle in my perfectly orderly world. Let me tell you about lacking warmth. Lacking warmth is what they call you when you've spent 6 years trying to build a family. It starts with the doctors, The ones who look at you with clinical pity. Unexplained, they say. Which is just a medical term for it's your fault. We just don't know how. You spend over $80,000 on procedures that turn your body into a pincushion and your life into a series of 2-week waits. You learn to smile politely when your friends post their gender reveal parties. All pink and blue explosions. While your world is just beige, the color of a waiting room. And when that fails, when you finally accept the biological surrender, you turn to adoption. You think, this is it. This is how we find our family. You don't realize that you've just traded one invasive process for another. The home study. They want to know everything. They ask about your marriage. They ask about your childhood. They ask how your parents disciplined you. They pull your finances apart. They fingerprint you like a common criminal. And you let them. You smile. You bake cookies. You offer them coffee. All while they walk through your life with a clipboard and a pen. Judging. And then comes Janet Davis. She wasn't our first caseworker. The first one, a kind woman named Sarah. I had to go on maternity leave. The irony was almost comical. Ms. Davis arrived on a Tuesday. She was tall, thin, and wore a severe gray pantsuit that seemed to repel all light. She didn't smile. She took the file, and her first visit lasted exactly 45 minutes. I had, of course, prepared. I had read every blog, every forum. Be yourself, they said, but be the best version of yourself. So I had cleaned, not just regular cleaning. I had deep cleaned. I had shampooed the carpets. I had organized the pantry with labels facing out. I had scrubbed the grout in the bathroom with a toothbrush. I had baked oatmeal raisin cookies. From scratch. When Ms. Davis arrived, I offered her one. She looked at the plate, and then at me. No. Thank you. Anna, I don't eat sugar. She walked through our home. Her black pumps silent on our clean floors. She didn't touch anything. She just looked. She stopped at our bookshelf, where I had arranged our books by color. It was a design choice. I'm an interior designer. It's what I do. Aesthetic, she murmured. But it didn't sound like a compliment. She sat on our perfectly fluffed sofa cushions and opened her notepad. Tell me, she said. What happens when a child spills grape juice on this white rug? I smiled. A practiced, calm smile. Well, club soda works wonders, and we'd probably teach them to use a coaster, or to have juice in the kitchen. She just wrote something down. The final visit was the worst. She came to observe our dynamic. Ben and I just existed. We made dinner together. We talked about our day. It felt stiff. It felt like a performance, because it was. We were two people desperate to be liked by a woman who seemed incapable of liking anyone. Lacking warmth. Rigid organization. She didn't see the why. She didn't see that my rigid organization was the only thing I could control when my own body had betrayed me. She didn't see that my immaculate home was my way of showing love. Of creating a safe, beautiful, calm space for a child who, we were told, would likely come from a place of chaos. My organization wasn't a flaw. It was a promise. It was a promise that I would always be prepared, that I would never forget a doctor's appointment, that I would have the diaper bag packed, that I would have a plan. And Janet Davis, in her infinite, cold wisdom, had looked at my promise and called it a threat. She's wrong. Anna, Ben said that night, pulling me away from the sink where I had been scrubbing the same pot for 10 minutes. He took the sponge from my hand. She's a miserable person, and she's wrong. But it didn't matter if she was wrong. She was the one with the clipboard. She was the one who held the power, and she had used it to break us. The days after the call were a blur. I canceled my appointments with clients. I stopped answering texts. The sage green nursery door remained closed. Ben and I orbited each other in our perfect, silent house. Two ghosts, haunting a life that hadn't even begun. It was Ben who finally broke the silence. About 4 days later. "We're going out," he announced. Not a suggestion. A command. "I don't want to go out." I mumbled from the sofa, where I had built a nest of blankets. "We are. We're going to the Pearl. We're getting coffee from that ridiculous place you like. The one that costs $9. And then we're walking. We're not going to let her turn us into this." He was right. Of course, he was almost always right. So I put on real clothes. I even put on mascara. Though my eyes were so puffy, it hardly mattered. We drove downtown. The city, a watercolor of gray and green through the rain-slicked windshield. We got our $9 coffees and sat at a small, wet, Madel table outside. Just watching people. Nobody looked happy. It was just Portland. We were walking back to the car. Parked near the Jameson Square streetcar stop. The rain had picked up again. We were huddled under one umbrella, trying to walk in sync. When I saw it, on a dark green park bench, half hidden by a soggy copy of the Willamette Week, was a wallet. It was a simple, brown leather wallet, worn at the edges, and rapidly getting soaked by the drizzle. "Ben, stop," I said, pointing. He looked over. Someone's having a worse day than us. He walked over, picked it up with 2 fingers, and flipped it open. "Any ID?" I asked. He started pulling things out. A dry cleaning ticket from 2021. A Multnomah County Library card. The logo faded. $3 in cash. A few receipts. And then the driver's license. He froze. What is it?" I said, moving closer. He just handed it to me. I looked at the photo. The severe haircut. Though shorter than I remembered. The same joyless eyes. The same thin, unsmiling mouth. Janet L. Davis. The address was listed. Not in Portland. Not even close. It was a street in a town I'd barely heard of. Somewhere on the coast. Seaview Point. My blood didn't just run cold. It froze. "No." I whispered. "No. It can't be." Ben took the license back, staring at it. "It's her." I felt a sudden, sharp, and ugly spike of adrenaline. Of joy. She was having a worse day. She had lost her identity. "Throw it in the river," I said. The words were out of my mouth before I could stop them. Ben looked at me. Shocked. "Anna." "I'm serious." "Ben, throw it in the Willamette. Let her see what it feels like to have your entire life scrambled. Let her go to the DMV. Let her wait in line. Let her feel 1/10 of the bureaucratic hell she just put us through." My voice was rising. Hysterical. Ben didn't move. He just looked at the wallet in his hands. He was a good man. A fundamentally good man. It was one of the first things I'd loved about him. He sighed, shaking his head. Not at me, but at the situation. "We can't do that." "Why not?" I spat. "She deserves it." "Maybe she does," he said softly. "But we don't. We're not her. Anna, we're not." He started to put the ID back in. But something else caught his eye, tucked in a flap behind the license. Almost hidden was a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a receipt. It was old, soft, and folded into a tiny, thick square. Curious. Despite myself, I watched him unfold it. It was a child's drawing. It was done in crayon, on a small piece of faded construction paper, the kind of paper they use in elementary schools. The drawing was simple. A stick figure with wild yellow hair, presumably a woman, and she was holding the hand of a smaller stick figure, and that smaller figure was holding a single, bright red balloon. At the bottom, in that clumsy, backward letter scrawl that kids have, it was signed My Keel. We just stared at it. This piece of chaos, this piece of color, in the wallet of the coldest, crayest woman we had ever met. It's just a drawing, I said, trying to regain my anger. But the fire was gone. Yeah, Ben said, carefully refolding it and tucking it back. Exactly as he'd found it. Just a drawing. He zipped the wallet into the inner pocket of his jacket. We have to take it to her. I looked at the address on the ID again. Ben. Seaview Point. That's on the coast. That's gotta be. He pulled out his phone. His thumb swiped. His face fell. The GPS says 3 hours. One way, and that's without traffic. 3 hours. I repeated. Numbly. In this weather. For her. For her. He confirmed. He zipped up his coat and started walking toward the car. Come on. We'd better start now if we want to get back before midnight. The drive was a nightmare. What starts as Portland rain becomes something entirely different when you get out on Highway 26. Heading toward the coast, by the time we passed Tillamook, the sky had turned a bruised, angry purple. The rain wasn't just rain anymore, it was a horizontal assault. The wind howled. A low, grieving sound that got inside the car. Our windshield wipers were on their highest setting, frantically slapping back and forth. But they were losing the battle. This is insane, I said, for the 5th time. My hands braced against the dashboard. Ben, maybe we should just pull over. We can mail it tomorrow. And what if she's already canceled everything Ben said? His knuckles white on the steering wheel. What if she's panicking? If I lost my wallet, I'd want it back, as soon as possible. You're not her, I argued. She's not you. She's the woman who told us we were too organized to be parents. And we're the people who are driving 3 hours in a hurricane to return a lost wallet. He shot back, his voice tight with the stress of driving. What does that make us? I don't know. Anna, but we're halfway there. We're not turning back now. He was right. We were on some dark, winding coastal road. The ocean crashing invisible, but terrifyingly loud. Just to our left, the GPS had long given up on a reliable signal, occasionally chirping rerouting. Before going silent again, we were following the address on the license, printed out on a now damp piece of paper from our glove box. Me anger at Miss Procedy Davis had long since evaporated, replaced by a cold, simmering resentment and fear. We were risking our lives. For what? To prove a point. To prove we were good people. To the one person whose opinion of us had mattered. And who had already failed us. Every mile was a battle. Every gust of wind that slammed into our small car felt personal. This was a test. A cosmic, ridiculous, and deeply unfair test. It was almost 8 p.m. when we finally found it. Seaview Point wasn't really a town. It was a collection of dark, wind-beaten houses huddled on a cliff. Her address was the last one, at the end of a gravel road that was quickly turning into a river of mud. The house was small and dark. The paint was peeling. One of the front shutters was hanging by a single hinge, banging rhythmically against the side of the house in the wind. This wasn't the home of a crisp, professional woman in a gray pantsuit. This was the home of someone who had given up. Ben pulled the car into the muddy driveway and killed the engine. The sudden silence, apart from the wind and the rain and the banging shutter, was terrifying. Okay, he breathed. Let's do this. We got out, pulling our hoods tight, The wind ripped the air from my lungs. We ran up the 3 broken concrete steps to the small porch. There was no doorbell, just a rusted knocker. Ben raised his hand and knocked. We waited. Nothing. Maybe she's not home, I said, already turning to go. She's home, Ben said, pointing. A single light was on, deep inside the house, casting a weak, yellow glow. He knocked again, harder this time. Bang, bang, bang. We heard footsteps, a chain rattling, the deadbolt turning, a sound like a bone snapping. The door opened a crack. A sliver of a face peered out. It was her. But it wasn't her. The Janet Davis the First knew wore her hair in a tight, severe bun. Her clothes were starched. Her face was a mask of professional indifference. The woman standing in the doorway was a mess. Her graying hair was loose, wild and tangled. She was wearing a faded, oversized flannel bathrobe. Her eyes, the same eyes that had judged me, were red-rimmed and puffy. She looked smaller. She looked broken. What she croaked. Her voice rough. "Ms. Davis," Ben said, shielding his face from the rain. "Janet Davis." Her eyes narrowed. Suspicion. Fear. And then, slowly, dawning recognition. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller," she whispered, her voice full of disbelief. What are you doing here?" Ben didn't answer. He just reached into his jacket, pulled out the damp, brown leather wallet, and held it out to her. "I think," he said, his voice steady against the howling wind, "you lost this." Miss Davis didn't look at us. Her eyes locked onto the wallet like a starving person spotting food. Her hand, which I saw was trembling, shot out and snatched it from Ben. She didn't say thank you. She didn't ask how we found it. She fumbled with the main clasp, her fingers shaking so badly she could barely open it. I thought she was checking for the cash. I felt that old, familiar spike of anger. Of course. But she wasn't. She ignored the cash. She ignored the ID. Her hands clawed at the hidden back pocket, the one we had found. She ripped the folded piece of construction paper out and held it up in the weak porch light, just for a second, to make sure it was still there. And then she shattered. It wasn't a small cry. It was a sound I will never forget as long as I live. A deep, agonizing wail that seemed to be ripped from the very center of the earth. She sank against the doorframe, clutching that small, childish drawing to her chest. And she sobbed. Ben and I just stood there, frozen, getting soaked by the storm. "You," she finally gasped, looking up at us, her face a mess of tears and rain. "You drove here. In this. For this?" "We found it," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "In the Pearl. We saw the address. It was my son's," she choked out, holding the drawing like it was a lifeline. "Michael, he drew this. For my birthday. The day before the accident." She looked at us, her gaze so raw, so full of pain. It was hard to look back. He was 8. He would have been 18 this year. 10 years ago. 10 years. And suddenly, I understood. I understood the gray pantsuits. I understood the severe hair. I understood the coldness. It wasn't a judgment. It was armor. Lacking warmth. Inability to handle chaos. My God. She wasn't describing me in that report. She was describing herself. She was a mother who had lost her only child. Her only chaos. And she had spent the last 10 years punishing the world for it. She saw a home that was perfect. A home that was neat. A home that hadn't been touched by the beautiful, terrible destructive force of a child, and it had triggered her. She looked at my perfect, sterile home, and she hadn't seen a promise. She had seen a ghost. "You should come in," she whispered, wiping her nose on the sleeve of her robe. "You'll catch your death." She led us into the house. It was the opposite of ours. There were stacks of newspapers on the floor, empty coffee mugs on every surface. The air was stale. It was the home of a person drowning in grief. A grief 10 years old, but as fresh as the storm outside. She didn't turn on the main lights. We stood awkwardly in her small, cluttered kitchen. "I rejected you," she said. Not a question. "Yes," I said softly. "I wrote that you were too rigid," she said, her voice flat. She looked down at the drawing, her thumb stroking the red balloon. What a horrible, stupid thing to say. Rigid, orderly. What a stupid. I wouldn't know. I won. She took a deep, shuddering breath. "You drove 3 hours in a hurricane for a stranger who was awful to you." She looked up, and for the first time, I saw the person, not the caseworker. "You didn't do it for a file," she said, her voice gaining a small bit of strength. "You didn't do it because you thought it would change my mind. You did it because it was right, because you are decent." She looked at me. That isn't cold. Anna, that's strength. That's character. That's what a child needs. Someone who will drive into the storm for them. She walked over to a mountain of papers on her dining table and, after a few seconds, pulled out her cell phone. "I'm calling the director's personal line," she said, her thumb already dialing. "I'm filing an addendum. Tonight, my report was incomplete. It was wrong." She turned her back to us as the phone started to ring. But I heard her say, "Hi. Tom, it's Janet. Yes. I know what time it is. I'm reopening the Miller file. It is 4:30 in the morning. My hair is in a greasy bun that I think has a Cheerio stuck in it. I am wearing the same pair of yoga pants I have worn for what I think is 3 days. My right shoulder is covered in a substance that is either spit up or yogurt. I am exhausted, the kind of bone-deep tired that coffee cannot fix. And I have never been happier in my entire life. I'm sitting on the floor of the nursery. The morning calm sage green is long gone. It's now covered in something sticky. I think it's applesauce. The beautiful, handcrafted crib is in the corner, holding a pile of laundry I haven't folded. The small toddler bed next to it is the one that's occupied by me and by Lily. She's 2, and she's a hurricane. She came to us 6 months ago. 6 months. 2 weeks. And 4 days. Not that I'm counting. After that night, everything changed. Ms. Davis didn't just file an addendum. She drove to our house the next day in her own car. This time, and apologized. She sat on our sofa. And she cried. And we cried. We didn't talk as a caseworker and applicants. We talked as 3 people who understood, in our own ways, what it meant to lose something. She personally fast-tracked our case for a new placement. She said we had been through enough. Lily is. She's everything. She's chaos. She's noise. She's tantrums and marker on the walls and juice spilled on the white rug. Club soda. By the way, does not work. Not really. My house is a disaster. There are blocks on the floor that I will step on at 5 a.m. There is a half-eaten granola bar on the coffee table. My bookshelves are no longer organized by color. They are organized by whatever Lily can't reach. Our home is no longer staged. It is loud, and messy, and sticky. And it's warm. We were rejected for being too neat. But life isn't neat. We learned that from Janet Davis. Our adoption wasn't finalized because we were perfect. It was finalized because we were real. Sometimes I think about that night. The storm. The drive. The wallet. On our fridge. Beneath a grocery list and a coupon for diapers. There is a drawing. It's not the original. Of course. That one is safe with Janet. We call her Janet. Now, we see her for brunch once a month. This one is new. It's from Lily. It's done in purple marker. It's 3 stick figures. A big one. A medium one. And a small one. Me. Ben. And her. And she's holding a bright red balloon. Janet sent it to her for her welcome home day. A new memory. A new beginning. We went into that storm angry. And grieving. And feeling like victims. We drove 3 hours for a woman we hated. Just because it was the right thing to do. And in doing so, we found our daughter. Kindness isn't about what's easy. It's not about being nice to people who are nice to you. It's about what's right. Even when it hurts. It's about seeing the person, not the file. It's about driving into the hurricane for a total stranger. Because sometimes, on the other side of that storm, is everything you've ever been waiting for.